The lights begin to dim. The roar of the crowd slowly fades into the distance. And somewhere beyond the stage, beyond the awards, beyond the millions of records sold, a question hangs quietly in the air. Why is Alan Jackson saying goodbye at 67? What happened that brought one of country music's most beloved voices to this moment? And is this really the end of an era that helped define country music for more than 3 decades? For millions of fans, Alan Jackson has always seemed larger than life. A towering figure whose songs became the soundtrack of family road trips, first loves, heartbreaks, celebrations, and memories that stretched across generations. Yet behind the legendary career is a story that began far away from sold-out arenas and flashing cameras. A story rooted in simplicity. A story built on faith, family, hard work, and perseverance. And perhaps most importantly, a story that reminds us that even the biggest stars come from ordinary beginnings. To understand why this moment feels so emotional today, we have to travel back to where it all began. Back to rural Georgia. Back to a small town called Noonan. Back to a little white house that Alan Jackson would later describe as humble in every sense of the word. Born on October 17, 1958, Alan Eugene Jackson grew up in a working-class family that understood struggle. His father, Joseph Eugene Jackson, worked hard to support the household. His mother, Ruth Music Jackson, helped create the loving environment that would shape Alan's values for the rest of his life. The family wasn't wealthy. Far from it. In fact, Alan often spoke about growing up in a modest home built around his grandfather's old tool shed. Money was tight. Luxury was practically non-existent. But there was something more valuable than wealth inside those walls. There was love. There was faith. And there was a strong sense of family. The Georgia countryside became the backdrop of his childhood. Long roads, open fields, church gatherings, small-town traditions. The kind of America that would later inspire many of his songs. As a boy, Alan wasn't dreaming of becoming one of country music's biggest stars. At least not at first. Like many young people growing up in small towns, he was simply trying to figure out who he was and where life might take him. Music entered his life gradually. In his early years, he listened to gospel music and the sounds surrounding his family's church community. As he got older, he became increasingly interested in country music. Artists like George Jones, Merle Haggard, and Hank Williams left a lasting impression on him. Their songs weren't flashy. They told stories. They spoke about real life. And Alan connected deeply with that honesty. What made him different wasn't a desire for fame. It was authenticity. Even as a young man, he seemed uncomfortable with anything artificial. He preferred sincerity over attention, substance over image. Those qualities would later become the foundation of his career. But before the fame came another life-changing chapter. Love. In 1979, Alan married his high school sweetheart, Denise Jackson. At the time, neither of them could have imagined the extraordinary journey ahead. What they did know was that they believed in each other. And that belief would become one of the most important forces in Alan's life. Years later, one of country music's most famous success stories would emerge from their partnership. While working ordinary jobs and trying to build a future together, Alan continued pursuing music. The dream remained alive. But dreams alone don't pay bills. The couple faced uncertainty, financial pressure, and the countless obstacles familiar to aspiring musicians. Then came a decision that would change everything. Nashville, the city where dreams are made, and often broken. Moving there wasn't glamorous. There was no guarantee of success. No promise of a recording contract. No assurance that anyone would ever hear Alan's songs. Like thousands of hopeful artists before him, he arrived with little more than determination and talent. The struggle was real. Days turned into months. Months turned into years. Doors closed. Opportunities disappeared. Rejection became routine. For many people, that would have been enough reason to quit. But Alan Jackson wasn't built that way. He kept writing, kept performing, kept believing, and then fate intervened. One of the most famous stories in country music history involves Denise meeting Glenn Campbell during a chance encounter at an airport. That conversation eventually helped create connections in Nashville that opened doors for Alan. It wasn't instant success, but it was the break he desperately needed. Soon, industry executives began noticing something special. Not because Alan was trying to be trendy, not because he looked like a superstar, but because he sounded genuine. His voice carried the spirit of traditional country music at a time when the genre was rapidly changing. And audiences responded. By the late 1980s, the young man from Noonan was finally beginning to see his dream become reality. Yet through it all, something remarkable remained unchanged. His humility, his faith, his devotion to family, his commitment to staying true to himself. Even as success approached, Alan Jackson never seemed interested in becoming a celebrity. He simply wanted to make honest music, and that honesty would eventually make him one of the most respected artists in country music history. But fame has a way of bringing challenges that success alone cannot solve. Because while the world was watching Alan Jackson become a superstar, a series of deeply personal battles were quietly unfolding behind the scenes. Battles that would test his strength, reshape his future, and eventually help lead him toward the emotional crossroads he faces today. And almost nobody saw them coming. By the early 1990s, country music was changing. New stars were emerging. Record labels were searching for fresh sounds. The industry was evolving faster than ever before. And standing at the center of that transformation was a tall singer from Georgia whose traditional style seemed almost out of place in a rapidly modernizing world. Yet somehow, Alan Jackson didn't just survive. He became one of the defining voices of an entire generation. What began as a dream in rural Georgia exploded into one of the most remarkable careers country music had ever witnessed. His debut album, Here in the Real World, introduced listeners to something increasingly rare: authenticity. The songs felt honest. The stories felt lived. The emotions felt real. Audiences immediately connected with them. Soon, hit after hit followed. Chasin', That Neon Rainbow. Wanted, Don't Rock the Jukebox. Love's Got a Hold on You. She's Got the Rhythm, and I Got the Blues. Each release seemed to strengthen the bond between Alan Jackson and his growing audience. But it was more than commercial success. He represented something deeper. At a time when many fans worried that country music was drifting away from its roots, Alan became a guardian of traditional country storytelling. His songs spoke about everyday people, working families, small towns, faith, love, heartbreak, the values that had shaped his own life. And listeners embraced him because they recognized themselves in his music. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, his momentum became almost unstoppable. Album after album climbed the charts. Concert venues grew larger. Award nominations multiplied. Soon, Alan Jackson was no longer simply a successful artist. He was a country music institution. The accomplishments were staggering. Dozens of #1 hits. Millions upon millions of records sold worldwide. Membership in the prestigious Grand Ole Opry. Induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Recognition from nearly every major music organization in America. Awards filled shelves. Plaques covered walls. Yet some of his most powerful moments could never be measured by trophies. One came in 2001. America was grieving after the tragic attacks of September 11th. The nation was searching for words. Searching for comfort. Searching for meaning. Alan Jackson provided it through a song called Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning. The performance became one of the most memorable moments of his career. Not because it was flashy, not because it chased headlines, but because it expressed what millions were feeling. The song reminded the world why Alan Jackson mattered. He didn't just sing songs. He captured emotions. As the years passed, his catalog continued growing. Songs like Remember When became deeply personal anthems for families across America. Others celebrated love, nostalgia, and life's simple pleasures. Many became timeless standards that younger generations would later discover. Meanwhile, life off stage remained equally important to him. Despite the demands of fame, Alan stayed committed to his family. His marriage to Denise endured challenges that many celebrity relationships could not survive. Together they raised 3 daughters. Family remained at the center of his world. Friends within the music industry often described him as grounded and approachable. While some stars embraced the spotlight, Alan seemed happiest when living a quieter life away from cameras. He enjoyed boating, spending time with family, being close to home, maintaining the values he learned as a child. That humility strengthened his relationship with fans. For decades, concertgoers felt they weren't simply attending a performance. They were spending an evening with someone they trusted, someone who understood them, someone who never forgot where he came from. His charitable work reflected those same values. Over the years, he supported numerous causes and community efforts, often without seeking attention for it. The public image matched the private person. And in an industry often defined by reinvention, Alan Jackson's consistency became one of his greatest strengths. But time changes everyone, even legends. As the years passed, subtle signs began appearing. Long tours became more demanding. Travel became more exhausting. The physical realities of aging slowly entered the picture. At first, most fans didn't notice. After all, Alan continued performing, continued recording, continued showing up for the audiences who had supported him for decades. But behind the scenes, a serious challenge was gradually becoming impossible to ignore. In 2021, Alan publicly revealed that he had been living with a neurological condition called Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. The condition, which he said had been affecting him for years, impacts nerves and can cause problems with balance, movement, and muscle function. Importantly, it is not considered fatal, but it can become increasingly difficult to manage over time. For fans, the revelation was heartbreaking. Many had noticed changes in his movement during performances. Suddenly, those observations made sense. Alan spoke openly about the reality he was facing. He acknowledged that performing had become more challenging. Walking across large stages wasn't as easy as it once had been. Balancing during shows required greater effort. Things that audiences rarely think about had become daily obstacles. Yet even then, he refused to disappear. Instead, he continued touring, continued singing, continued doing what he loved. The determination inspired countless fans. But it also raised difficult questions. How long could he continue? What would happen if the condition progressed further? Would there come a day when the road that had defined so much of his life finally reached its end? The questions grew louder with each passing year. Every appearance carried a new layer of emotion. Every concert felt slightly more precious. Every performance seemed to carry the weight of time itself. Then came a series of announcements that left fans wondering whether they were witnessing the beginning of a farewell. Not a sudden goodbye. Not an ending born from scandal or tragedy. Something far more personal. Far more emotional. The realization that even the greatest journeys eventually reach their final chapters. And as Alan Jackson looked toward the horizon, millions of fans began asking the same question. Was country music preparing to say goodbye to one of its most beloved voices? The answer was coming. And when it finally arrived, it would leave audiences across the world reflecting on a legacy unlike any other. 4 years, Alan Jackson's voice felt permanent. Like the highways he sang about. Like the small towns that inspired his music. Like the memories attached to every chorus and every verse. Fans grew accustomed to seeing him on stage, guitar in hand, delivering songs that had become woven into the fabric of American life. That is why the word goodbye feels so difficult. Not because it signals an ending in the way many feared, but because it marks the closing of a remarkable chapter. And now, at 67, Alan Jackson is saying goodbye. Not to life, not to music, but to the road that carried him across decades of unforgettable performances. The truth behind the title is both emotional and deeply human. After years of living with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, a hereditary neurological condition that affects balance, movement, and muscle control, Alan gradually came to a realization. The stage he loved was becoming harder to navigate. The physical demands of touring were becoming increasingly difficult. The miles between cities felt longer. The recovery after performances took more effort. The challenges were no longer temporary obstacles. They had become part of daily life. For someone who built his career standing before thousands of fans night after night, that realization could not have been easy. Yet Alan approached it the same way he had approached nearly every challenge in his life. With honesty, with humility, and with gratitude. Rather than quietly disappearing, he chose to acknowledge reality and share that journey with the people who had supported him for more than 3 decades. In recent years, his farewell tour became more than a concert series. It became a celebration. A chance for audiences to say thank you. And a chance for Alan to do the same. Every stop carried special meaning. Every standing ovation felt different. Fans weren't simply cheering for a hit song. They were honoring a lifetime of memories. Many had grown up with his music. Some had played his songs at weddings. Others had listened to them during heartbreak. Parents introduced his music to children. Children eventually introduced it to their own families. His career had become part of multiple generations. And everyone understood that these performances represented something historic. A final opportunity to experience a living legend in person. As news of his farewell spread, reactions poured in from across the country music world. Artists who had shared stages with him spoke about his influence. Musicians who grew up listening to him described the impact he had on their own careers. Industry veterans praised his commitment to traditional country music during periods when trends constantly shifted. For many performers, Alan Jackson represented authenticity. Proof that success did not require abandoning one's identity. Proof that staying true to your roots could still resonate with millions. Fans expressed similar emotions. Social media filled with personal stories. Stories about first concerts, favorite songs, family memories connected to his music. Moments that seemed small at the time but had become priceless with the passing years. That is the unique power of artists like Alan Jackson. Their songs become intertwined with people's lives. Long after charts are forgotten and awards gather dust, the music remains. A melody heard during a road trip. A lyric remembered during difficult times. A song that instantly transports someone back to a specific moment decades earlier. Very few artists achieve that kind of connection. Alan did. Again and again. And perhaps that is why this farewell feels less like a retirement announcement and more like the conclusion of a shared journey. Because fans never viewed him as a distant celebrity. They viewed him as one of their own. A man who never forgot where he came from. A husband who remained devoted to his family. A father who prioritized his daughters. A performer who treated audiences with respect. A star who somehow remained grounded despite extraordinary success. Throughout this chapter, his family has remained beside him. Just as Denise supported his dreams before anyone knew his name, she has stood with him through the challenges that followed. The partnership that began in Georgia decades ago continues today. And in many ways, their story reflects one of the central themes of Alan Jackson's life. Success matters, but relationships matter more. Fame fades. Family endures. As his touring career winds down, his legacy is already secure. More than 75 million records sold worldwide. Dozens of major awards. Countless hit songs. Membership in the Grand Ole Opry. Induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Yet numbers alone cannot explain his importance. His true legacy lives elsewhere. It lives in the honesty of his songwriting. It lives in the traditions he helped preserve. It lives in the artists he inspired. And it lives in the millions of listeners who found comfort, joy, and understanding in his music. Future generations will continue discovering songs like Remember When, Chattahoochee, Drive, and Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning. They will hear the sincerity in his voice. They will recognize the craftsmanship in his storytelling. And they will understand why Alan Jackson became one of country music's most respected figures. The farewell from touring does not erase any of that. If anything, it highlights it. Because legacies become most visible when we pause to appreciate them. And that is exactly what this moment represents. A pause. A reflection. A celebration of a man who spent decades giving audiences pieces of his heart through music. So why is Alan Jackson saying goodbye at 67? Because time eventually asks every performer the same question. Because health can change even the strongest among us. Because every journey, no matter how extraordinary, reaches a point where the road becomes quieter. But there is another truth hidden inside this goodbye. The music remains. The memories remain. The influence remains. Long after the final curtain falls, Alan Jackson's songs will continue playing through car radios, family gatherings, wedding receptions, and quiet evenings at home. New listeners will discover them. Old fans will revisit them. And the stories he told will continue finding new hearts to touch. That is why this farewell is not tragic. It is meaningful. It is the closing chapter of a career lived with integrity, humility, and purpose. And perhaps that is the greatest achievement any artist can hope for. Because true legends never really disappear. They live on in every song they leave behind, in every life they inspire, and in every memory they help create. The stage lights may dim, the tours may come to an end, and the crowds may eventually go home, but the music endures. And as long as Alan Jackson's voice continues echoing through the lives of millions, this goodbye is not the end of his story. It is simply the moment his legacy begins speaking for itself.